Eating high protein has been proven for many, many, many years now to eliminate things like gestational diabetes or preeclampsia and completely prevent them. So you do have power in that regard. If you can make protein and getting enough protein your highest priority for your nutrition during pregnancy, that is going to be one of the most important, wonderful things that you can do. All right, let's get started on today's episode. I think we've kind of seen this trend of this being a big conversation right now. And so I'm going to jump on that, but I want to talk about birth a little bit, and that is gut health. So nutrition is just blowing up right now. I'm sure you're seeing all kinds of things on your feed if you are a pregnant mom or if you're a woman at all about nutrition and gut health and your microbiome and all this stuff. And so I want to talk specifically about the things that we know that evidence is showing us is so good for us during pregnancy and our growing babies. So let's dive in. And here's kind of why it matters. Your gut is your baby's gut. So everything that you are eating and putting into your body or your body is experiencing in the way of gut health is transferred directly to your baby through that placenta. So this is why it's such an important conversation. And this ecosystem that's within your body, it kind of shapes your baby's immune system and their metabolism and even their brain health and that gut microbiome. So when your gut is balanced, your baby's gut gets that strong, resilient start even in the womb. And the best part is building this strong, resilient gut is not as hard as you might think. So this doesn't mean that you need 17 supplements and a fridge full of powders or anything else like that. These are small, simple things that you can do every day to build your and your baby's health. And the same things that you're doing right now that are keeping you from complications like preeclampsia or gestational diabetes or inflammation are the same things that are going to be good for your baby's gut health as well. So research shows that when your gut bacteria is out of balance, it's called dysbiosis, that it leaves us, as pregnant women, up for risks like preterm birth, high blood pressure, and insulin resistance, right? That gestational diabetes. So that's why it's so important to be talking about right now while you're pregnant. So when your gut is thriving, you've got that steadier blood sugar, a more even weight gain, lower inflammation, and overall smoother pregnancy outcomes. What's interesting is that your gut naturally shifts each trimester of pregnancy as you're growing that baby. We need different things. We need a different amount of protein. There's different hormones that are happening during that time. And so it means that the lifestyle choices that we're making right now are going to matter even more. And this is something that Lily Nichols and I discussed when she was on the podcast here before. I'm going to make sure and link that episode. One of the things that really stood out that I think every mom should and needs to know is that your protein requirement is higher every single trimester that you are pregnant. And so your protein should actually increase the more pregnant that you are in order to have those building blocks of life. And that goes for moms who are listening and you are not pregnant yet. Now is the perfect time to be preparing your body. So they say, at least 12 months before you get pregnant, should you be preparing your body to sustain life. And don't stress if that's not you. Don't stress if you're pregnant and you're like, wait, this wasn't even planned, It's nothing like that. It's just if you have the time and you are aware of this and you're trying to get pregnant, like now is the time to focus on these things and get that stuff in order. I just did a wonderful episode with a woman who had unexplained infertility for 4 years, and she just got pregnant because of what she was putting into her body and the nutrition that she was doing. So I'll make sure to link that episode as well. It's just a fabulous story. But in other words, what we put into our bodies really does matter and makes a huge difference. All right, so to get started, let's kind of focus on that first trimester and those first 12 weeks of pregnancy. So this is because your gut health in these early days is kind of laying that blueprint for the rest of the time here for your baby's gut and brain. So during that first month, your baby's neural tube is closing, and nutrients like folate and vitamin B and iron are really important here. And all you need to worry about is protein when it comes to those things. Yes, you can supplement, but if you're doing a supplement, and supplements can be wonderful, that's what they should be, a supplement. The real focus needs to be on getting what we can and should be getting nutrient-wise from our food. And so make sure that you are doing what you can to eat good quality meats to get that protein, because animal protein is where it's at when it comes to building life. So your gut bacteria thrive, the good bacteria thrives when you have protein, but it's also really great because if you are doing high amounts of protein and low amounts of all the excess, especially in the way of like excess carbs, sugars, refined things, then your body's blood sugar can be really balanced too. And that helps with nausea and a bunch of other things. So make sure that you are focusing on that protein first and then add in all the other things. So it's easier said than done, especially if you're not feeling well during those first 12 weeks. But what's interesting is moms who have come up against some nausea, if they can get themselves to those higher amounts of protein, typically see a drop in the nausea too, especially when you're not putting it with other things like sugar and refined carbs, other things that can cause more of an issue, inflammation, and that kind of thing. So if you can really focus on protein being your first go-to, and I know that can be hard when you're not feeling super hot, it can really help your body feel well too. And along with that, we're talking about microbiome and what we put into our bodies and stuff, but movement is really important as well. So especially if you're feeling nauseous, if you can make sure you're getting hydrated, do what you can to get hydrated and hit your protein goals, whatever those might be for you. You're aiming for about 120 plus a day, right? We go even closer to like 200, 180 to 200 as we get to that second and third trimester. But if you can eat high amounts of protein, and that just looks like eating about 30 to 40 grams of protein each meal. Or if you're going to have like 5 meals a day, then you would split that up a little bit more, 20 to 25 grams of protein, depending on what you're going for. And that'll help you hit those goals. But if you can focus on that protein first and get it in your belly first thing in the morning, then that can help with a lot of things. And it's really good and healthy for you and baby. Another way to kind of boost that immune system in the way of what we put into our bodies is fermented foods. So this is a better way than probiotics. However, if you are somebody who has histamine issues or you eat fermented foods and it just feels like your stomach gets all kinds of bloated and blows up and you just swell and whatever, maybe I'm speaking from experience, then a probiotic might be better for you, but that's something to talk to your provider about. I do find that talking to holistic providers or providers that have some kind of nutrition background, particularly in the way of holistic nutrition, seems to be the ones that have this information a little bit more solid. But adding like fermented foods that can be like a sauerkraut or, oh my gosh, there are so many good fermented products out there now. It's insane. I just picked up a ton of them at Sprouts and I think I had like 4 or 5 different options. I grabbed all of them. They were so good. But anyways, there's so many different things that you can choose from and you don't need a ton. Like every time that you eat a meal, if you could just grab like a tablespoon of a fermented product and have that on your plate, that would be enough to help build that really good bacteria. And the reason that this is important is all of the stuff that's happening in our gut, all that's being transferred to baby and stuff too. And that is true. But we also have things that are happening in our entire bodies, right? What happens in the gut transfers to those different areas. And one of the things that you're going to be tested for week 36, 37, a little bit later in pregnancy is Group B Strep. And now they're doing the urine test really early on, and they're catching Group B Strep or testing people positive very, very early in pregnancy. And so that might be something you're coming up against right now. But if you test positive for Group B Strep, then you have to decide that there's going to be antibiotics offered. Do you want to take the antibiotics or not? So then you have to make a decision on that. And then if you choose to take the antibiotics, that means that you have to head into the birthplace a little bit earlier because they want you to have at least 2 doses. So they want you there at least 4 hours prior to giving birth because they give it every 4 hours and they want you to be able to have the 2. And then you have to deal with if you get more than the 2 and you get a lot of antibiotics because it's every 4 hours if you're there for quite a while, then what are the repercussions? And we know antibiotics kill good bacteria and bad bacteria. And oftentimes we do see that with moms, one of the side effects could be that her and baby get thrush. And that is like a yeast infection and it gets on your nipple and that hurts really bad. And it's in the baby's mouth. And it can just be kind of this tricky birthing a baby and nursing and all this stuff is hard enough already. It's hard when we add in some other things. And so it kills good bacteria and bad bacteria. And that's why I always say to moms, if you've had antibiotics during labor, make sure that you follow it up with a good probiotic. But these are things that you can do now because studies do show there is evidence now. And I'm so glad that there is because when I first started talking about this, there wasn't. But studies do show now, and there is evidence for If you have probiotics during your pregnancy, that you will actually test negative for the Group B Strep, which means we are actually building good bacteria and not in the places that it shouldn't be. We're not building bad bacteria in other places. Now, beyond that, and this might surprise you, I feel like I always know it. Like I've heard it enough times that I know it's real, but it takes a lot for me to be like, oh yeah, I got to do that thing because it helps my gut and internal stuff too. But there are lifestyle habits, believe it or not, that protect your gut and gut health. And that can look like hydration. Like you guys know, I'm always talking to you about hit your protein, hit your water. Hydration is huge and it should come from a good source. So it shouldn't really be tap water. That's really a last resort. Yes, it's quote unquote clean enough to drink, but it's not the best source of water. If you have access to something like a Berkey or a water filtration system, and not necessarily the ones that you put in the fridge, like the Brita or whatever, they really just don't do what you need them to do. If you have good source of water, spring water nearby, some kind of delicious and good for you, good microbed water, that's what you want to aim for. Now, if you have tap water and that's what's available to you, just make sure you're drinking water. Okay. It is very important that we hydrate ourselves. But I had to put that little plug there because I didn't know any better growing up. And now that I do, I'm going to share it with you. The other thing is rest and sleep. So this can be really tricky for moms, especially as you get later and later in pregnancy. Part of me feels like it's a little bit on purpose as we're like so uncomfortable and tossing and turning, and maybe it's preparing us a little bit for what's coming. And maybe it's also so that we can be excited about not being pregnant, because some women just really love to be pregnant. And it's kind of like when your kids turn into teenagers and you're like, yes, you can go. When would you like to go? Right? I don't know. But if you can get that rest and that sleep, it lowers inflammation. It's good for hormones. It's good for repair. There is a lot that comes for rest and sleep, right? It lowers your cortisol levels. If you can focus and make sure that you are getting restful sleep, that is really important. And one of the ways that you can do that is to be quiet and shut things down about 2 hours before you decide to go to sleep. So that means no scrolling on your phone. If you are or need to, for whatever reason, you're going to watch a show or you're going to be on your phone or whatever, blue light blockers are best, especially the red ones at night. But even just hitting the blue light blocker on your phone, it is better than nothing, but it's going to keep your mind up. And that blue light in your eyes it just keeps your mind awake. So if you can be up with the sun and go to bed with the sun, or maybe even just we're talking about sleep and you want to just be able to watch the sunset so that your eyes are getting that good red light. And then you come into the house, and if you're able to kind of shut things down, you're either using candlelight or red light bulbs, or you've got your blue light blockers on. All of those things can help your body have restful sleep. The other thing would be not eating right before bed, which again, if we are nauseous and you're feeling like you just need a little something, easier said than done. But if you're getting really good amounts of protein throughout the day, then you shouldn't be super hungry before bed. And so water would be the thing to do, and not eating too late into the night, because if your body's having to digest during the night, it does make for less rest sleep. So you want to have restful sleep. Aim for that. I kind of mentioned a little bit about movement earlier, but if you can get 2 15-minute walks in a day, which is like nothing. You absolutely can do this even in the cold. I promise you can do this. If you can get 2 15-minute walks in a day, it will make for just all around better. It's good for your digestion. It's good for your rest. It offers better circulation. It actually helps with your blood sugar. There's a lot of things that come from a little bit of movement. So isn't it interesting that our bodies are just so smart and so good that we can do these little things and they have these overall really big, wonderful effects. So remember, it doesn't have to be this big thing about getting to the gym every week and chugging protein shakes or anything like that. It's just daily habits that make us more in tune with ourselves and allow our bodies to heal. Second trimester is typically, for most moms, and I'm so sorry for the moms that are like, it's not me, but typically for most moms, this is their best trimester. Did I say semester? Second trimester. Your second trimester is that good one that is like you usually have a little bit more energy. You're not so food averged or averged. Is that a word? Averted? I don't know. You are a little bit more excited about eating. Things don't sound so disgusting anymore and you have the energy. And so you can kind of like enjoy your pregnancy a little bit, hopefully. And your belly's not so big that you're not super uncomfortable when you're sleeping. So let's talk about kind of that second trimester gut health. Now, during the second trimester, this is when your baby's organs are maturing and especially the digestive system. And so all that means is all those good microbes that their gut is being colonized with, that comes from our gut. So we want to really focus on doing what is good and right there. The other thing to focus on is prioritizing that blood sugar, because this is usually the trimester where women get diagnosed one way or the other with gestational diabetes, and it is preventable. So there are going to be some situations where that's not the case. Those are going to be the exception. The majority of us have an opportunity to completely avoid having gestational diabetes through a high protein, well balanced diet. So that is maybe not completely eliminating carbs, but let's have your carbs come from some really healthy vegetables rather than breads, cereals, pasta, and especially a lot of that refined stuff. Certainly not from cookies and all of the other things that, yes, you can have occasionally. But if we focus on our protein, maybe having some vegetables on the side and making sure that we're walking and taking care of our bodies and we focus on that blood sugar balance, then you are going to keep yourself in a safe range for pregnancy and birth. And the thing is here, a lot of the times what we are told about gestational diabetes is it's not your fault and it just here's the numbers of women that it happens to and all of this, and it's true that it's not your fault, but it is preventable. And that's only fair that you know that. Because here's the thing, if a mom ends up having gestational diabetes during pregnancy and she's told you can manage it by diet, so make sure that you're pricking your finger and testing your blood sugar every so often, throughout the day and keeping track and logging all this stuff. If you can make it better by diet, then you can prevent it by diet. If you can make it so when you test and your gestational diabetes was, that's what tested it and your sugars were too high, but you can keep them in normal range with diet, then you could have done that from the beginning. And I think this is the conversation that providers are not having with women right now that needs to be had. And so this is not to make anybody upset, because I don't want anybody here that's like, I had gestational diabetes and I did everything in my power and all that. I'm not, in no way do I want you to feel attacked. I want you to feel so much love and empowerment and knowing that you might have an opportunity to make it better next time or even this time. Okay. Now there is a point where gestational diabetes is a little too hard to manage with diet. And then we have to talk about insulin or other medications that are used to help mom and baby. But just know that eating high protein has been proven for many, many, many years now to eliminate things like gestational diabetes or preeclampsia and completely prevent them. So you do have power in that regard. If you can make protein and getting enough protein your highest priority for your nutrition during pregnancy, that is going to be one of the most important, wonderful things that you can do. Back to the second trimester kind of stuff. The other thing that's happening for your baby internally is that their brain is forming. And so that's when we hear a lot about the omega-3s and the DHA and that kind of stuff. So that is it's all available to you through natural foods as well. So that's like salmon and sardines and those healthy meats that are going to help your body have all of the things that it needs for your baby. The other thing when we're talking about iron, and I've shared this before, if you are comfortable and you can stomach getting like some beef liver and chopping a little bit of it off and grounding it up and just putting it with whatever ground beef or whatever meat that you're eating, whatever beef you're eating, from what I understand, because I have not tried it, so I'll be honest about that. But from what I understand, if you can grind it up and put it in the meat, then the flavor is a lot more palatable. If you are not able to do that and you're interested in taking a supplement, then that is the thing that is showing really just the best that moms can do during pregnancy to increase healthy iron levels. So that would be a beef liver supplement. I'll give you guys a link. There's one that I do recommend and we do have a coupon code for, so I'll put that in the show notes. But real food, is going to be your best bet always. So if you're able to stomach the beef liver ground up and seasoned in something, then definitely give that a try. This trimester, your baby's immune system is also kicking into gear. And so there's a couple of things that we can do to support that too. Some mineral-rich foods would be, think about magnesium. So avocados and red meat and lentils, these minerals are better absorbed when your gut is balanced, and it can help to prevent anemia, which supports baby's oxygen supply. You can also take a magnesium supplement, something like magnesium glycinate. Now, you guys have heard me talk about like if you are constipated and you need to use the restroom, lots and lots of water and magnesium citrate. That is the one that you would use. But in this case, it would be glycinate. So again, something to speak with your provider about. But if you're a mom, for example, that's getting like those leg cramps, those Charlie horses, and I definitely experienced that during pregnancy, magnesium is the go-to helper for that. And it really does work. So it might just mean that you're not getting enough in your diet or it's not being absorbed for whatever reason. And so if you do need to supplement on that one, you can. The other thing that we continue to encourage during the second trimester is making sure that you're getting enough of those probiotics. So think fermented foods, and there's different ones that you can use. So we've got the like fermented cabbage, like the sauerkraut and stuff. I talked about all the yummy ones that they have at the different stores, but there's also things like yogurt and kefir and different ways that you can get the probiotics. So be thinking about that. All right, let's move on to third trimester gut health. So this trimester, your baby's brain is exploding with growth in the best way. Billions and billions of connections are being formed, and fat stores are building too. Those both rely on nutrients that you absorb best when your gut lining is healthy. Choline is a big one, and this is like we need this daily. Choline can be found in eggs, so especially the yolks. So you want to think of maybe having 2 eggs a day if that's something that you can stomach, or like 6 in the morning if that sounds good to you. Okay. I will tell you right now, maybe this doesn't sound good to you, but it's one of my favorite ways to have eggs right now. There's 2. I'm going to give you 2 just so that you can leave this episode, hopefully with some kind of like, this is how I'm going to put it to practical use. So we've been doing where we grill onions in like butter and a little bit of oil. And then I pull those out and then I put a bunch of eggs. So I like scramble eggs, little bit of milk, and put that down. And then I mix it all around until it's all heated up and cooked. Throw the onions back in, and then a bunch of melted cheese. You could do cheddar cheese, you could do American cheese, pepper jack cheese, whatever you decide to do. That one's pretty high on the fat for sure. And you may or may not have issues with onions, but it gets a lot of eggs easily into all of our bellies because eggs can be kind of boring by themselves and they're just not that great. Or I don't like them as much. I know many, many people are like, how could you say that? It's the best thing ever. And if that's you, great. I don't have to convince you of anything. Eat your eggs. You're good to go. But the other way that I like them is I do a bunch of hard-boiled eggs and then I cut them up into little slices and I put it in a bowl with cucumber, and you can add feta cheese if you'd like, but cucumber and bacon and avocado, and then I do a little bit of balsamic vinegar all over it, and it is so good. Salt and pepper. So there's your 2 ways to get your eggs in if you're like so tired of eggs or you're like, I can't think of them anymore. Beef and lamb are another really, really good place for choline. Salmon or those liver capsules that we talked about, or eating beef liver, all of that can be really good. So back to the salmon and sardines, 2 to 3 times a week, you can do a fish oil if you're not getting the salmon or sardines a couple of times a week. It can come from other sources. I would say for me, it's harder to take the fish oil. They do have capsules. It's usually not the best though. What you're going to want is the liquid stuff, and that can be a little bit hard to stomach during pregnancy. So even that second trimester where you're doing better. So totally up to you. But if you can stomach some sardines a couple times a week, and my favorite way to have those is just air fried. And I just put Frank's Red Hot on top of them. But we've done some like Chipotle stuff or like mayo and Frank's, or, however you guys can get them down. They're really, really good for you. Or if you can do that salmon too, that's a really great option. Iodine is a big one that the majority of us are deficient in. And it's super controversial. So I'm not going to get into all the details there, because if you take it to your regular provider or even sometimes the holistic provider, you're going to get conflicting information and it might even sound really scary. But especially with everybody using sea salt now, which is not iodized. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, except for the iodine part. We're finding that a lot of people are not getting the amount of iodine that they need. So whether you choose to be tested and take a supplement, The iodine that is put in our salt is the very like base minimum we need to not see major issues. It's not even the minimum that we need to be healthy. Like it's not the amount that we actually do well with. We need more, quite a bit more than what's in the salt. So again, it's probably a conversation to have with your provider. There are some things that are naturally higher in iodine. Eggs have iodine, seafood has iodine. So iodine sources are just very, very important. And if that is a conversation for you to have with your provider, I think it's a good one to have. I would say look into it a little bit yourself and see what you think. I think Dr. Brownstein does a really great job of talking about iodine. And you can YouTube some really neat interviews with him. He doesn't go over pregnancy specifically, but it's all part of the same and how we take care of our bodies. But he also has a really great book. So I will put some of those in the show notes as well so you guys can take a look. Your baby's lungs are maturing this trimester. In fact, if you're a mama that you have had a scare like 30 something weeks where you're like, we don't know if baby's going to be born. One of the things that they do is they're talking about giving steroids to be able to get those lungs developed so that they can breathe on the outside. This is something that your body is naturally doing during that third trimester. And yes, your gut makes a huge difference with how all of that develops. The other thing that's happening is your body is naturally more insulin resistant right now, which is benefit to you, but keep with that really high protein and putting good things into our bodies. Your digestion definitely starts to slow, especially later in pregnancy. And that is somewhat normal. It's just the hormones and progesterone and relaxin and all the stuff that is being produced that kind of slows all of that down. So if you can make sure to be eating things that are going to help everything flow and move through a little bit better and making sure that you have good hydration, that's going to be your best friend for this third trimester. So again, if you are following that high protein diet, you're not adding a lot of the refined junk, refined carbs and things, then you probably shouldn't get too stopped up. There are natural things that you can do, like psyllium husks or like that magnesium citrate, and again, lots of water that can help move things better. But if you naturally have good bacteria, you will have better digestion, and that leads to less constipation as well. We also know that moms that are taking iron supplements because they have tested and their iron comes back low, that getting on the iron supplement slows that down or can cause constipation anyways. And so a lot of times when they give an iron supplement, they're also giving you a stool softener, and that's just not the greatest to have to do, particularly when you can take something like the liver supplements, and it is so much better for getting the iron where it needs to be, and it doesn't come with the constipation. So keep that in mind if that is something that you are discussing with your provider. And when we're moving on to birthing time, and we want to talk about good bacteria too, this is why we get so excited and prepare for vaginal births. Now, if you need a cesarean, absolutely. And there's, we won't get into all the things there. And it's so good that they exist today for the women that need them. But if that baby can go through the vaginal canal, it is so good for baby because they are going through good bacteria that gets on them and actually strengthens their immune system and gut microbiome. It's really, really healthy for them to go through there. On top of the fact that it gets all this good bacteria on them, as they move through the vaginal canal, they actually expel all the liquid from their lungs naturally, especially with an intact perineum, meaning a mom who hasn't had an episiotomy. Now, a natural tear, that is different, and when it occurs is different, but the tightness that happens from having an intact perineum allows, as the baby is coming through, it squeezes that baby's chest and it expels. That baby is able to spit up all of the surfactants and all that stuff that's in their lungs. It gets all that fluid completely out of their lungs. Well, maybe not completely, but it does its part. It does what it's supposed to do so that baby comes out and breathes really well. It's one of the reasons that if you have a cesarean birth, like first thing they're doing is like kind of smacking some stuff on the baby's back to help break up all the stuff so that they can, because there is extra fluid in baby's lungs for a baby that's been born cesarean, or they just want to make sure that it's really clear. And so when a baby comes through and they've got the good bacteria and they're able to squeeze all of that out of their lungs, then it's just so good for them. Now, if you do end up needing a cesarean, don't worry. There are still plenty of things that you can do to improve that gut microbiome and just make everything flow smoothly. And I'm going to include in this episode as well, and I'll in the show notes, and if you're on the email list, list. I'll just send all this good stuff to you. But we'll make sure to include the gentle cesarean birth plan, which I tell every mom to just download and put in your bag, because then you don't have to think about it, right? You're not planning for the cesarean. However, you have a plan for the cesarean, right? So that way, if it does end up kind of shifting that way, you have some things that are really important to you that you should be able to get. And so some of that is that immediate skin to skin. That's actually really good for mom, really good for baby. It signals for the breasts to do certain things. It helps regulate baby's temperature, all the things that you can still enjoy, whether or not you give birth vaginally or by cesarean. Also being able to have that baby close and breastfeeding using their cues, that colostrum is gold. It is so good for your baby. It is full of so many good properties for their immune system and its own probiotics. And it's basically like a probiotic cocktail. Like, it is so good for your baby. So even if you're choosing not to breastfeed, or there's complications and you can't breastfeed, or whatever the case, it is really common for moms to express the colostrum even onto a spoon, and then they put it in a syringe and get it into baby, because it is really, really good for them. The other thing that you can do is rooming in and then delaying that first bath, right? Because it depends on how old baby is and how baked they are, right? But they come out and they have this white creamy substance on them, and it's called vernix, and it's super good for their skin. It's, really keeps their skin safe and healthy and free from outside irritants, but it also hydrates it as well. And so vernix is just wonderful, wonderful stuff. Make sure that you massage it in, delay the bath. They're clean. They come out clean. They could be wiped off or whatever, but they don't need to have any soap or anything to wipe all that off. You just want to massage it right back into the skin. Now, we just spent this episode connecting all the dots between your gut health and your pregnancy and your baby's future. So I hope that you leave here with some inspiration. And also, if you're looking for more of that step-by-step plan where somebody can hold your hand and walk you through the process of exercise and nutrition and pregnancy and labor and birth, all of the good stuff, then come join me inside the My Essential Birth course. It's myessentialbirth.com/get started, and you can join me in there today.